I'm one of the pastors here on staff at Faith, and I get the chance to open God's Word and share with you this morning. We're in a series on from Psalms, and it's it's funny actually that I get to teach from Psalms because people who know me well know that I don't really spend a lot of time in Psalms. And in fact, I did like a read through the Bible plan a number of years ago, and I made it through Lamentations, I made it through Numbers, and I failed out in Psalms. But God has this year really kind of worked on my heart, and I've spent some more time studying it and beginning to understand it to a little bit different of a level. And so it's great. I get an opportunity now to share something that I'm pretty excited about. In fact, we did a retreat with my guys' small group a couple months back, and one of the things we did was focus on Psalms and read through it and study certain parts of it. And it was a ton of fun and really enjoyable and life-giving for me. And so now I get a chance to share some of that with you. And so here's what I'll do is I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to Psalms, and we'll go from there. So the book of Psalms is a collection of 150 songs and poems and prayers to God that are compiled into a single book. At some point during Israel's exile to Babylon is when the 150 got put together. If you didn't know, there's more out there. In fact, the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible has more Psalms than ours does. But at some point, some scribes got together and said, okay, all these Israelites that are in exile in Babylon, so right, Israel had been run over by another nation, and then they got spread all over the empire. They need to be encouraged. They need to have something to pray through. They need to have something to look at, and that's what the book of Psalms is. They gathered some of the most well-known Psalms and put it into a single book for people all over the empire in exile to study through. And it's divided into 5 books, and then kind of a beginning and an ending little section. And what you see is they're organized in a way that makes great sense for people in exile. They start really heavy lament on the front end, and they work their way to praise on the back end. And as Israelites would make their voyage back to Israel, back to Jerusalem, they would sing the Psalms of Ascent, which are near the back end of the book of Psalms. And so it's interesting because growing up, I didn't really know what to do with the book, but it's actually, there's like a logical order that goes to it for people that live in exile. And we are not in the kingdom of God today, right? And so the logical order is good for us even today. We get to follow through and journey through it today, and we're going to be on the beginning. We're going to be in the front end of the book. We're going to be in chapter 25, which is a lament Psalms. In fact, that's, again, like I said, the beginning of Psalms was really lament heavy. And if you've looked into Psalms, you might see that there's a bunch of different themes, both in function and in the way they're written. Again, lament is one of them. This whole category called imprecatory, or thanksgiving, or praise, wisdom, historical, and then there's royal and messianic psalms, as well as kingship psalms. But today's psalm is one of lament. And so what I wanted to show you is a little bit of what are we looking for when we read a lament psalms. And so there's a couple of guides that we can run you through. Number one, a psalm of lament is an honest prayer. In general, they're prayers, and they're prayers from pain, and they're prayers to God from pain and grief and anger and confusion while waiting on God's promise, while waiting on God to intervene and God to do something. The second thing that you would see is they serve to name what's wrong in the world and bring suffering into God's presence instead of hiding it. And so much of this series is about that. It's going, this thing that I'm working through, this thing that I'm dealing with, what if we actually brought it before God rather than kept it to ourselves? And that's exactly what a psalm of lament is meant to do. It's to go, this suffering that I'm experiencing, let me lay it before God. And so you might see a bunch of words like this, like how long, or hear my cry, or answer me, or don't hide your face from me, or rescue me, or enemies, or distress, or faithful love, or wait for the Lord, right? You'd see all of those phrases show up in Psalms of Lament all over the place, and frequently in that order, right? They start kind of with how long, and they go all the way to wait for the Lord, because there's a bit of an equation to Psalms, but especially for Psalms of Lament that looks like this. You would address God, You describe the pain, you ask for help, and then you express trust and anticipate praise. So you address God and you say, hey, God, here's the pain. Let me tell you what I'm going through. Can you help me with this? And then you express, God, I believe you're going to do it, or I find rest in you. And then you anticipate praising the Lord. And that is a psalm of lament. They almost all follow that. And what I love about today is Psalm 25, is it does that over the course of the whole psalm, but we're going to just zoom in on the end of it. We're going to look at the end of it in verse number 16 through 25. And at the very end, of course, God's already been addressed, but it does the rest of the equation, and we're going to see that all at the same as we go through our time together today. So if you've got a Bible or Bible app, you're going to want to be in Psalms number 25, and it'll be up on the screen as well. And here's what we've got in verse number 16. Turn to me and have mercy, for I am alone and in deep distress. My problems go from bad to worse. Oh, save me from them all. Feel my pain and see my trouble. Forgive all my sins. See how many enemies I have. See how many enemies I have, and how viciously they hate me. Protect me, rescue me from them. Do not let them disgrace me. For in you I take refuge. May integrity and honesty protect me, for I put my hope in you. And so I want to walk us through these couple of verses, this psalm this morning. And here's the first thing I would do is I would highlight the first verse. Turn to me and have mercy, for I am alone. I am alone, right? Lonely, isolated, loneliness. And that's an interesting way to start this. That's the big problem that he's laying out, or the author's laying out, is feeling alone. And as we look at that, it's interesting because the world that we live in seems to be really connected, and what we like to do is sort of pretend like we're never lonely. And what we know is that's not true. In fact, in a study in 2024, 30% of U.S. adults said that they had felt lonely at least once a week over the prior year. And then those numbers were higher for young adults and higher for single adults. And the tipping point actually seemed to be that once a week for a year. That seems to kind of be the tipping point, because more frequent was not like it was significantly less people, because, right, it's at least once a week. And then as you go the other way, what we know is there are people that feel it, once a month or once in a while, or on occasion they feel loneliness as well, moving up the scale. But most of us are aware of what loneliness feels like, and a lot of the time we're surprised when it hits us. We don't see it coming. Maybe even you've sat in a room of people and you felt it. When I first moved to California, I took a job at a church in Sonoma County, and our lead pastor had a birthday, and all of our staff got together for it, and we played this game that was sort of about him, and they were laughing and had all these inside stories and jokes, and all of a sudden, in this room of a full staff and friends, I felt totally alone, because I was like, I don't know a single one of these stories. I don't know his favorite anything except for he likes burritos. I don't know anything, and he did like burritos. We went out to Mexican food a lot. But anyway, it's like I sat in that room and felt totally alone. And maybe you've been there. And there's a psychologist, his name's Gabor Mate, but what he does, he points out the following equation, that loneliness is a stressor, right? Loneliness causes stress in our life, and of course, stress raises cortisol, and cortisol leads to illness. And so as all of those things happen, but what we see is a weekly loneliness feeling is chronic loneliness, right? Which leads to chronic stress, which leads to chronically high cortisol, which leads to chronic illness, or at least in part, some of the experience that we have in this country with chronic illness is probably due to such high levels of loneliness. That seems like an issue. I don't think we necessarily need to continue to make you wonder if you've ever felt it, but let me show you this headline from 2024. It says, loneliness poses health risks as deadly as smoking. So it's May of 2023. Rather. And then zoom in on this right here. We've got this next line that says, as deadly as smoking up to 15 cigarettes daily. So not like if you smoke once in a while. And I was listening to an interview with the Surgeon General about this, and the guy interviewing was like, so what you're telling me is rather than sitting at my lunch and eating it alone, or sitting at my desk and eating my lunch alone, I should take regular smoke breaks because I would be healthier? And of course the Surgeon General was like, well, no, that's not the answer, right? And that's not the answer, but it does actually lead to this next point, which would be we do often try to find silly answers like that. We try to self-medicate when we feel alone. And so we do that through a variety of means, and we try to handle it on our own. And that may be we work hard, or we find healthy habits, or we do that in bad ways where we distract ourselves, or we begin to use substances, maybe like this is suggesting, or we go to something like social media to feel connected. And it's not that social media doesn't connect us, it's just a cheap connection. Right? It's just a poor version of a better thing. And so what's interesting is we sort of self-medicate, or we live in a world where we're like, yeah, you need to learn, we try to teach kids to self-soothe, and that's just a myth. That doesn't actually exist. Nobody on their own can just soothe themselves. They're usually reaching out for something better or bigger, and that even might be just sitting alone and reaching out and calling out to God, right? That might be what that may be, or it would be something else, like one of these other ways that we sort of soothe ourselves. So in other words, right, if we did the like hard work or healthy habits or substances or distractions or social media, you may find somebody that goes like, maybe somebody will notice my work, right? Maybe I'll get noticed that way. Or maybe someone will notice that I've been taking care of myself, or that I've got some good looks. Maybe I can numb this feeling. Maybe I can stop thinking about this feeling. Maybe I can find a connection somewhere else. And sure, like I said, social media offers us a form of connection, but it's a much lower quality form of connection. It's a lot of things, but one thing it isn't is social, right? And some of our self-medicating and self-soothing is actually what causes problems. Another psychologist, his name is Adam Grant, cites a couple of things. He says, number one, our Protestant work ethic, right? The idea that working hard and accomplishing a lot is a morally good thing. He goes, that actually drives loneliness, because you lock in and you work more hours and you focus and you keep pushing. And he's going, that's actually driving more loneliness. And then he cites studies from around the world where, like in India, it's not uncommon for coworkers to go on vacation together because they've created environments where they actually get to know one another at work, and they enjoy being in each other's company. I thought, I like the people I work with even here, but I don't know if I want to go on vacation with any of them unless Greg is taking me to New York. Then I'll go, because he always sends me pictures of pizza and bagels, and I'm jealous. So anyway, okay, and so then next you've got the transient culture that shows up. And that's where we don't keep jobs like we used to. Historically it's been normal to hold on to a job for a decade or decades, and now we've got places where we keep jobs for a few years and we kind of bounce around to sort of climb the ladder and get greater pay and things like that, which, truth is, statistically, you do get paid better when you move around from job to job. Overall, people that change their jobs more regularly tend to make more money. And so we sort of chase that, so we have new jobs, and we move, and we uproot, and we resettle. And it's a space where we've forced ourselves to feel more lonely. And then the last one that he points out is, he goes, tech. Tech has led to speed and ultimately more disconnection or cheaper connection. And so I bet some of you track your kids' screen times, and if you don't, you should. But you should track their screen time, and I bet you if you were to pull your phone out right now and you go into your settings, and in your settings, there's Apple in particular makes it really easy. Like, it's on the landing page when you go into your settings, and you can hit your screen time, and you can see how much time you've spent on your phone. And then if you click it, it'll actually show you like your activity for the week. It'll tell you kind of an overview of the week, and I would bet you are on your screen a lot more than you think you are. And then I would bet you probably spend more time on social media than you think you do, because on average, the US, of course, dominates on average of screen time with more than 7 hours a day spent in front of a screen, and that's all screens, that's not just your phone. But the average 16 to 64-year-old, which is most of us in the room, right, spends 2 hours and 21 minutes on social media. And it's interesting because the studies actually tell you that the 2-hour mark is the thing that makes the difference for the negative. And so if you spend 30 minutes or even an hour on social media, almost every study actually points out that it's good for your loneliness or it's good for your connection, right? You get to catch up on stories, you get to see birth announcements, you get to see marriage, you get to see kids having fun, you get to see your friends on vacation, and that's good. But then once you hit that 2-hour mark, that's actually the tipping point to where all of a sudden self-image starts to fall apart and loneliness creeps in and anxiety comes into play. And there's actually a whole podcast you could listen to called Left to Their Own Devices. And it's interesting because I skirted this. I'm just a little bit older, but those that are like 30 and under, but really that like 20 to 30 category were given a smartphone pretty young. And then we didn't have the ability to track and monitor it, and left to their own devices is going. We gave them this device with the world at their fingertips, and look what happened. And it breaks it all down. It's really, really fascinating. And if you've got kids, you should listen to it. But with all experiences, loneliness, some of us, we all experience loneliness, and some of us far more regularly than others. Loneliness is a problem. Our self-medicating or self-soothing only tends to make it worse. And if that doesn't convince you, God says this in Genesis chapter 2. He says, it's not good for man to be alone. So there you have it, right? So we've got, of course, all the studies, and God from the day one has been saying, actually, let me just tell you plain and simple, it's not good, right? It's not good for you to be alone. And so here's what I want to do, is I want to take you through the profile of a lonely person. And I'm going to ask some people to stand. Now, here's what I'm not going to do, just so you know. I'm not going to be like, if you feel lonely right now, please stand. We're not going to do that, okay? We're going to stand in just some categories of people, and then I want to build a little bit of a profile. And so here's what we'll do is if you're a student, middle school, high school, college, I guess younger, if you're elementary, that's fine. Would you just stand real fast, just so you can be like, okay, I'm thinking about this. We're not going to point you out. This is just you identifying. And maybe feeling overwhelmed in that area, maybe feeling overwhelmed in your space is like this. I'm feeling, or alone goes, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Maybe it is like I can't seem to keep up. Maybe it's everybody else seems to be having a good time and I'm not. Maybe it's other people seem to have X, Y, or Z better than I do, right? Maybe that's where loneliness creeps in. Or in college, in the college sense, you would go, you got a new school or a new city or no friends, and you might be in a dorm room alone. I remember when I went off to school on the East Coast, and I dropped everybody off at the airport, and then I got back to my dorm room, and I was totally alone, and realized, like, I don't even know what to do from here. I don't know anybody. I don't know where I'm, and just sat alone. What about this? Anybody have a kid in the last, let's say last 18 months? If you're a newish parent in the last 18 months, would you stand? Just so we know where you're at. Good. Okay. And I would actually, I just crossed into 19. Should we make, I won't make you stay standing. I want to make you stay standing, but I won't. You could take a seat. But that's like the solo, especially for moms, like the solo, dark feeding struggles. That's the fear of missing out because you can't say yes to everything you've wanted to say yes to. That's the complete exhaustion and going, historically I would have said yes and gone and done this, and all my friends are doing it, but I just don't even have it in me to get out of the house, right? How lonely does that feel? What about this, those of you that go, hey, I work full-time or more. If you work full-time or more, this should be a lot of us. Will you stand up just real fast so we go, okay, this is the full-time or more people. Yeah, and so a lot of you maybe experience the looking at a screen all day and wondering if somebody else will notice. Or again, like the new parent, you're exhausted at the end of the week after working 40 plus hours. You're just too tired. You're like, I would love to go do something with somebody, but I just don't have it in me. And it's like, if all this other stuff didn't exist, maybe I would be able to not feel lonely anymore. And then what about this one? Those of you that transition, maybe if you transitioned a job or you moved in the last 18 months, would you stand? So we know just job transition, moved in the last 18 months. This is going to be a smaller crew, but you'll be in there. Okay. And this is easy. New cities, new coworkers, new rhythms. Those things exist, right? And the last one that we'll have people stand for, and then I'll go into some categories you don't have to stand for. What about this one? This one will cheer for you, but also then I'm going to point this out. But empty nesters, your youngest has graduated and moved out, or all your kids have moved out. Where are our empty nester people? Where are they at? Yeah, okay, there you go. Yeah, and empty nester people, right? The house, especially if you've stayed in your home, you've got a house that was once loud and full of life, is quiet and clean, right? Isn't that a lonely feeling? You're like, wait, I actually kind of wish this place was messy. I kind of wish there was something happening here. Or if I had a friend who put their dog down this week. If you've ever lost a dog, why does that feel so lonely? There's no like ticking on the floor anymore. It's just quiet. And then you've got these other categories where you can go, what about death of a spouse, loss of a job, a diagnosis? You look at those things, and I don't even have to explain why those feel lonely. But man, are those some categories that feel totally alone. And so here's what we see. This is what comes actually next in the passage. We go, alone, this is what it leads to. We zoom in on verse number 17. Can we see verse number 17? It says, I am alone and in deep distress. My problems go from bad to worse. And so what do we see there? It's just anxious is all it is, right? My problems go from bad to worse. The distress of my heart increases. The author wavers between panic and begging God for help. Loneliness is this stressor, and we know that, and we often succumb to more stressors when we're stressed out. We fall into more anxious thoughts. And so he goes from alone and anxious to now he catches those. And this is where we would see what's next. We look at this equation, and we address God, and we describe the pain. I'm alone, and I'm anxious. And then he, like I said, catches the thought process, catches the downward spiral, and he says, save me from them all. Feel my pain and see my trouble. Forgive all my sins. Protect me. Rescue my life. Don't let my life be disgraced. And what we think about when we're lonely matters. The author of this psalm thought about all of those things, all of his other problems and pains and troubles and sins and his shortcomings and people that were after him. What we think about when we're lonely matters. Psalms of lament, and specifically Psalms 25, show us that naming our feelings and our anxious thoughts are what we need to do. In fact, 2 Corinthians put it this way. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse number 5 says, we take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ, or make it obey Christ. And what you think about when you're lonely matters. You can focus on the pain and the feelings, or you can invite God into them. I'm in the middle of kind of an odd relational thing with somebody, and yesterday as I was working on my yard, I just kept cycling back to it, kind of just kept spiraling back to this thing that's like, this isn't going the way I wanted it to go. This is only going poorly, it feels like. And I finally just said, I'd listened to some stuff earlier in the week, and so I was like, all right, I'm going to try that. And I just went, God, I hand the things I can't control over to you. And I was just looking for a moment of calm and peace. And I went, God, I want to hand the things I can't control over to you. And that's what this looks like. And learning your triggers and learning to catch your thought spirals is crucial in helping you address how you feel and in your ability to recover, firstly, by inviting God into it. And then the equation moves from here. So we've addressed God, we've described the pain, we've asked for help, and this is the next part of the equation that we see. And we looked at 2 Corinthians a second ago. Take me one more, and this is what we've got. So we've done those things, and now at the end we express trust, and we express trust, and we anticipate praise. We express trust, and we anticipate praise. And this is how the psalm ends. It ends with this: for in you I take refuge. My integrity and honesty protect me, for I put my hope in you. After all the situations that they named, after handing everything over to God, the psalmist simply says, I take refuge in you, and in you I find my hope. This is an example for us to live by. When there is noise, we invite God to cut through the noise, and then he leads us beside calm waters or quiet waters. And so here's what I want to do is I want to use that equation to give you some takeaway for today. And so let me walk you through. I'm going to give you a simplified version. I'm going to give you 3 parts of the equation. The first one is, of course, describe your pain. And that's capturing your thoughts and feelings and telling them to God. You've got to learn to do those things as they're happening. Pay attention to what you think and what you feel. Feelings matter. And learn what triggers them and get familiar with the feelings so that when they're happening, you can name them. Because that's what we see over and over again in Psalms, is we see this ability to name what's wrong. And it can be helpful to say those thoughts and feelings out loud or write them down into a journal or talk to them with somebody. And what we would tell you today is simply pray them out to God and go, God, this is all wrong. And can you intervene in this? Which is where we would go to the next thing. We would say, ask for help from God and from others. What we believe is that we're a family of faith, that we are a faith community, and that means we lean in, we work with each other through these things. And so first, we would go, ask for help from God. Pray that he brings peace to your thoughts. Pray that he combats your lonely narratives. Pray that he reveals meaningful relationships that you may have with other people. Because a lot of the time when you let loneliness continue, one of the reasons you feel it weekly and more and more and more is you feed it. You just let those thoughts be. And this is going, what if you cut that narrative off at the knees and went, no, I actually have some people. I've got this, sure, I might have a core wound or I might have a core narrative that I carry with me, but I have people that I can point to and go, yeah, but with them, that's not true. And that's where God goes, yeah, and then others. Talk about how you feel with a trusted person, a spouse, a family member, a coworker, a friend, a teacher, a leader, a therapist. And combat loneliness by showing it you have people who care. And I promise you, it may feel like a shallow beginning, but in this room there are people who care. We have a prayer team come up every week, and that's not because they feel obligated to pray. It's because they genuinely care about other people. We've got a pastoral team who would love to chat with you. We've got a biblical counseling ministry that's free to you, because what we do is we go, yeah, we believe people actually care. And then the last thing we say is express trust. Thank God, turn to worship, and keep showing up. We want to thank God for his presence. We want to worship him because worship has a powerful way of replacing our worry. And I mean both worship in our life, but also worship in actually singing. Because there's this amazing thing, a friend of mine, Marco, does all kinds of studies on the human brain, especially adolescent developing brains. And one of the ways that you can learn that God is outside of self and that he's bigger and more involved than you could ever imagine, and this is like actually study backed, is corporately worshiping together and corporately praying together. And so one of the things that we do when we worship together is we rewire our brain to go, yeah, we've got a God who's bigger and outside of me and sees what I'm going through, and we believe it. And the power comes even more so when we worship together. And so that's why we go, yeah, keep turning to worship because it can replace your worry, but keep showing up here or somewhere and worshiping with other people because there's so much power in what that can do for you. And so we go, we describe the pain, and we want to invite you to do that. We want to invite you to tell God what you're going through. It is a false form of worship to go, oh, everything's good all the time, because it's not, right? And that's not trusting God. Trusting God is going, God, everything is not good, and I need you to know that. And then we get the opportunity to ask for help from God and from others. And one of the things that I deeply believe, and that I teach our students all the time, and that I practice in my own life, is that God gives us other people for a reason. And yes, prayer is great, and yes, God is good, but sometimes the answer to your prayer and the answer to your struggle is God. Is beyond God, is God, the people of God, the people that God gives you, right? And then the last thing we would say is expressing trust and just keep believing that God is who he says he is and that he's going to do what he says he's going to do. Let me pray for you, and then we'll close with some chance to practice this by worshiping together. God, thank you just for an opportunity to be together. Thanks that we have a space where maybe at least for a moment in a week we don't have to be alone. God, for the people in this room that feel alone today, God, will you help over the next few minutes as we sing together? Will you give them the courage to sing? We give them the courage for just a moment to not feel alone. Lord, will you give the people in the room who are feeling great today, haven't felt lonely in a long time, will you give them eyes to see maybe the lonely person next to them? God, may we be a space where nobody can walk in and walk out feeling the same. Not only because we had genuine encounter with you, but also because we had a genuine encounter with your people. Lord, we are grateful that you listen. We're grateful that you show us that our feelings and thoughts actually matter. And God, we're grateful that you deliver us through those things to a space where we can worship once again. And may that be true of this moment. In your son's name we pray. Amen.